All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started here. If someone could just write in the chat box that everyone can hear me, that would be great, just so I know that this is working for you all. Can everyone hear me? Great, thank you, appreciate it. My name is Lara Brainerbanker, and I am the Senior Designer here at Achieve. And I will just fully disclose to you that a lot of this information was presented at the FOCF training that we attended and provided to you all in November. So for those of you who went to that, you might be hearing some of the same information. I did update a lot of our content so that it's using a lot of our new end-of-year campaigns that we just completed. So that's kind of exciting, and I hope you guys enjoy seeing some of those. But what I'm going to be doing today is I will be going through how to visually communicate yourselves as nonprofits, especially to your donors. And we will specifically be looking at some pieces that we've created here in-house as Achieve, just to give you more inspiration more than anything, and help you as you're thinking about campaigns for the spring or the summer or whatever you might be doing in the future. Feel free to type in questions. As I'm going through, I'll try to respond to them verbally, and I'm happy to hear any of your thoughts as we start this. So let's start and talk a little bit about messaging. Definitely when you're doing a design for any campaign, you have to start with a great message. And you're really not going to get anywhere with your donors or how to communicate your mission unless it's clear, concise, and makes sense to who you're speaking to. This is sort of a typical communication that you might see from an organization as a direct mail piece. And as you can tell, it looks pretty boring, a lot of text, maybe a logo. It's not really jumping out to you, and it's not something that you're going to pick up and say, wow, this organization is really doing some great things. What it does is it forces you to have to read the content to get an idea of what the organization is doing. And so part of what I want to walk you through today is showing you how you can help connect with your donors and your constituents in general in a way that they don't have to read a lot of the text. So this is a piece that we just completed for one of our clients, Little Red Door Cancer Agency, and this was for their end-of-year campaign this past December. And we tried something really different with them, and we used a piece that was sort of a four-fold piece that went into an envelope and included a remit envelope as well. And they purchased a lot of different lists for this. It was a really great campaign, and it was done primarily for their acquisition to try to get new donors. So as you can see, we're using a lot of photos, definitely a lot of color. And the primary thing that makes this piece different from the piece that we just saw is it's focusing on a story. So when you're creating messaging for donors or constituents, think about telling your story as an organization through one of the people that you help. It's great to show your programs and you can talk about the things that you do all day long, but unless people actually see the specific clients that you're serving, they're not going to make that human connection. So this piece uses a lot of photos of their clients, also volunteers, and kind of highlights their programs throughout in addition to those photos. This is another piece to illustrate how you might think about targeting specific donors when you're creating fundraising pieces. This one in particular is for individuals. So this particular organization did one piece that was geared towards corporations, and then this piece was towards individuals. And the reason that you want to do that differently is corporations, your dollar amounts will be much higher. And so you can think of it in terms of when we send out a mailer or an email or direct people to our website, we want to direct them to what's going to resonate with that group of people. And you don't necessarily need to segment it in a lot of different ways, but definitely splitting it up between an individual and a corporation is a really great way to start thinking about it. You might also think about different demographics, that you can split it down to further, but that's sort of a good start. So as you can see with this piece, the dollar amounts are 10, 25, 50, 100, and 500 to try to get to that $12,000 mark. And they are able to do that through even those small gifts, which add up really quickly. So when you're thinking about your message to your constituents and donors, here are some questions that are really helpful to start frameworking what you're going to say. And definitely to start thinking about who you serve. Like I mentioned with the little red door piece, think about who can you feature? What photos can you include? How do you serve them? So how can you tie that person that you serve to the programs that you're creating in your organization? And really think about why it's important. That kind of gets to the core of your mission. What is it that you're doing in the community that's making your community a better place? And then, like I mentioned before as well, think of a story. Think of someone who would be willing to talk to you. Maybe you can videotape them. Maybe you can write down some quotes. Think of a way that you can tie a photo to specific quotes and a story, which will really resonate with your constituents. So I want to move a little bit into the design side of things. So once you have sort of your comprehensive messaging figured out, there's definitely this point where you have to decide as an organization, especially if you're a small organization, do you do the design in-house? Perhaps you have an in-house designer. Maybe you don't have an in-house designer. Maybe it's your marketing team doing the designs. Or are you going to go hire a designer to do this piece? And it really depends on the situation. It obviously depends on budget. And I certainly recognize that a lot of you are under really tight constraints with your budgets and don't have extra resources to go out and hire a designer. I do want to walk through just briefly when would be a good time to hire a designer rather than doing things in-house. So here are some, let me back up for just a moment. Talk about what design is and why it's different than just marketing or messaging. I do want to point out first, design is more than just making something look pretty. Sort of how I mentioned at the beginning with messaging, unless you have good content, a good mission statement, and good messaging and content to give to your donors and constituents, you're not going to be able to resonate with them through a good design. So basically, you need to start with a really phenomenal organization with really awesome programs and great clients that you're serving in order to convince people to donate once you pair that with a great design. Especially for the smaller organizations, when you're thinking about doing design in-house, I definitely like to encourage, keep things simple. Using just some clear messaging with some really compelling photos is going to be a lot more impactful than trying to go over the top and do things that you're not really prepared to handle. So when you're doing a design, don't think that the more graphics or the more colors or the more different types of fonts you use, the better. Definitely keeping things simple is going to help kind of increase that credibility and professionalism with your donors. So when you are thinking about hiring a designer, there's a lot of different steps that you want to make sure that you go through with them. Going back to my first statement of design is not just about making things look pretty. There's this whole big process of how to figure out who you are as an organization, create that messaging, do some sketches, talk about style boards with colors and logos in your style guide, and then move into some of those initial drafts of the design. The only reason I bring this up is if you are going to go out and hire an agency to do some of your design work for you, you definitely want to make sure that you're going through all of these steps with them. I don't want you to get in a situation where you hand over some content and then all of a sudden you have a finished product from a designer and it's not anything like what you wanted it to be. So there's a lot of collaboration that needs to go on, and this could also be applicable to in-house design as well, creating that strong communication and really partnering with those teammates to make sure that you're creating the design that makes the most sense for your organization rather than something that just looks good. When you're thinking about hiring a designer, certainly finding the right fit is important. When you're looking at different agencies or firms, find someone who has the same values as you, perhaps volunteers for your organization, or just has a vested interest. When you find a designer who has that passion for what you're doing as an organization, they're going to love what they're doing, and you're going to reap the benefits of that passion. So be picky, ask them lots of questions, ask them what their values are, make sure that you are a good fit for them as much as they are for you. And then again, going back to sort of the steps in the process, if you're unsure about the design or if you're not feeling 100%, rework it. Sometimes this means, adding some additional fees. Sometimes it means a little bit longer process. But if you don't get what you want in the end, it's really not worth your time and effort. And also going back to the previous list it's so helpful for designers if you can pick out examples of what you like. If you say the word, I like things that are edgy, what I think is edgy could be really different than what you think is edgy in a visual sense. I might think edgy is pink and black and bold, and you might think edgy is something totally different than those statements. So getting as much visual representation in front of your designers is really going to help you make sure that you're both on the same page to create the exact style, look, and feel that you're looking for. So I want to move a little bit into the fundraising side of things. Fundraising is obviously a unique sort of design challenge and messaging challenge as well. So when you're thinking about designing for donors, you're obviously going to be thinking a little bit differently than you would with your typical marketing materials, especially when it comes to your mission and explaining that in the fundraising sense. So let's just talk a little bit about fundraising pieces. It's definitely a communication tool. It's a way, it brings a really good opportunity for you to choose to represent yourself visually. Sometimes we can get stuck and think that marketing materials are really what's important, but when it comes down to it, your organization really depends on your donors for existence. And so to also put as much care and attention into those donor materials is really going to help you in the long run to build credibility, build trust, and really look professional to those donors. Oops. So this is an example of a design that we did for an organization, and this is something that they brought to corporate and foundation presentations, and so they're going in and asking for large amounts of money, and so we helped them sort of articulate, message, and then design how they wanted to present themselves to those corporations and foundations. And as you can see here, it's a lot of just highlighting their programs, highlighting their clients, and then also talking about, why is this important? Why is this important for Indiana where they're at? And why is this going to help them? Why is giving money to this organization going to help the community at large? So showing some of those stats is really helpful. Showing, their client demographics is great. Just getting some of that really good information and content out to your donor base is going to be helpful. And doing it in a visual way, such as this, is really going to, create a really compelling message to those donors. You can also think about fundraising pieces in a multi-channel way, and we usually recommend that just because there's so many different kinds of donors and they respond to different pieces in different ways. So you have things like direct mail, you have email, you have social media, you have websites. There's all these different avenues that you can reach a donor base, and by kind of crossing all of those channels is going to increase your chances of acquiring more donors. So now I'm just going to walk you through some of our pieces. And like I mentioned at the beginning, this is really meant to be inspirational to you. You can think, hopefully this will help you brainstorm for your own organization of how you could possibly change some of your own materials. And definitely at the end, I'm happy to take more specific questions on what might help your particular organization. Let's walk through some of these as inspirational examples. This is another end of year piece that we did in December for an organization. And this piece was to acquire new donors as well. And so we really wanted to focus on creating something that was really sharp and really going to grab your attention. Using that big typography on the front is really impactful. You don't always need a ton of images or a ton of content, but getting a statement like that that's very compelling, that's going to grab their attention right away, oftentimes is better than including too much content. And then on the interior, we focused on, highlighting some of their programs and how they're really making a difference in their community where they're at. This piece was actually just folded up like a trifold brochure, and then the backside was the mailer, the envelope part of it, and you just stuck the address and the stamp on that side, and it was ready to go. The reason I bring that up is because it didn't increase their costs as far as they didn't have to print exterior envelopes. So you might think about being a little bit creative with how you're sending out your materials and using something like this that's going to be a standalone piece where you don't have to print extra envelopes. Here's another direct mail, and this is actually United Way of Orange County, who we made a really great connection with last year and really enjoyed working on their piece. I like this piece as an example of a direct mail because of the use of photos. There's a lot of action shots, but you also have some close-ups of the faces. That's something that is so powerful and really easy to do for you as an organization. If you have some photos that you can use from a past event or a fundraiser or one of your clients, and you can see on that second page on the right-hand side, there's that image, and then there's a little story beneath it on that particular client. So pairing that quote with a photo is so great and so powerful to connect with your donors. It'll really help you, bring that human connection and help those donors to resonate with what you're doing. And direct mail, we've done various webinars on direct mail pieces, and it's true that they're not growing, but there are still a lot of donors out there who prefer direct mail and will respond to a direct mail. So it's important to include that as a part of your multi-channel campaign because you're still able to kind of hang on to those donors who prefer direct mail by using that outlet. Here's another piece that we created, and this was for a community development organization. And similarly, using photos to highlight some of their clients. In this case, it wasn't a photo with a particular story, but rather a photo with their program. So it highlighted what they're doing in each program and what kind of person might participate in that program. But I also want you to take a look at the front page. And I mentioned this earlier, using some stats on who you're helping and how many people you're helping is going to be very impactful to show your reach as an organization. And this is something that's really easy for you to do. It doesn't take a lot of design skill to kind of highlight a number like that on the front page on the right-hand side and show how many people you're touching in the youth category, in the preschool category, in the older adults category, and just really bringing attention to that. That way, when someone picks up that letter, right away they're going to see, wow, this is their impact. They've reached this many people. How exciting. And it's something that happens very quickly, whereas to gather all that information through the body text would require the user to pick up the letter and read the whole text before getting that information. So by pulling it out and highlighting it on the side like that, you're kind of forcing your donor to see that information before they even read the letter. I'm going to walk through a couple of email examples. So like I said, doing sort of a multi-channel approach is very, very good to capture different types of donors. And this was a part of the Little Red Door campaign. We sent out 3 different emails. And, again, featuring the stories was really important. And they made the great step of hiring a photographer for this campaign. And we were able to use these beautiful photos that really were touching and resonated with people, as well as tied to their quotes. And then one thing that you always just want to be sure to, do in your emails and on your direct mail is be sure you include that ask. You can see on every single email at the bottom it says donate today. Really make that the highlight and big and easy to do in your emails and direct mail. If you don't have that donate, people aren't really sure why they're getting the email. You want to give them a clear action step and a clear ask, and usually at the end to sort of push them to that next step. Here's a couple of other examples, and these are actually two different campaigns. But I just wanted to highlight again, on the one with the campaign on the left, if you don't have a lot of photos or if you don't have it in your budget to hire a photographer, there are still things you can do, especially with typography, to help emphasize your message and your mission. So as you can see with this one, we took the "we need your help to donate" and put that in a banner and put it at the very top so that it was so clear why you were getting this email and what we wanted you to do when we sent it. So if you're really constrained on resources and need to just use typography, it's still incredibly impactful, and there's a lot that you can do with headers and titles to make it to highlight the information that you want to highlight in a really compelling way. Also think about social media, making sure that you use those consistent messaging that we talked about at the beginning in your social media campaigns. That's going to be key to having consistency across every piece and every channel that you're communicating through. So I would take that messaging that you create at the beginning, include it through your direct mail, include it through your emails, but also highlight that in all of your social media venues. So whether it be Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or whatever you might be using, be sure that you're communicating that same clear message with the same image and visuals to hit home your brand and your campaign and what you're doing as an organization. Another option for reaching donors and getting your message out there is mobile, which is something to think about, to increase your donation levels. We've seen this very successful with a lot of different kinds of organizations. Obviously, it takes more resources and more time and more planning, but it's just something to keep in mind and to think about. It's another avenue that you can use to help get your message out there as well as take donations. So this is a part of that same campaign. And again, just making sure that message and style and look and feel is consistent across all of your channels is so important. You want someone to pick up this piece to know right away that it's your organization just by looking at the fonts and the colors, and maybe they'll see your logo, but more than anything is you want to keep that consistent look and feel so that whoever's picking it up, whether it be a donor or a client or a board member, whatever it might be, they will recognize immediately that this is tied to your organization. So let's also talk a little bit about websites. And this was a campaign that we did called Every Kid Healthy. And this was to get people to pledge to the Every Kid Healthy campaign and to pledge to help the children in their lives to stay healthy. And what we did here is we created a separate landing page for the pledge, but we also included the same visual elements on their homepage. So that's also something to think about, when you're considering your website. Again, using the same consistent messaging, but when you're doing a campaign, you can also think about maybe using some of the imagery from your direct mail or your email and include that on your homepage on the website so that you're pulling in that campaign and creating a really consistent look and feel across all channels. Same thing here, we included the kind of the wood grain with that big bold message, exactly the same as the direct mail piece that I showed you earlier, just included on their website as something to tie into that campaign. And now I want to talk a little bit about donate pages in particular. Oftentimes donate pages are maybe the last thing that we like to think about because it's just a form, and what can you possibly do with it? How can you make it interesting? So I wanted to bring this up as an example of a way to bring a little bit more excitement around your donation page, adding something like a banner at the top, or perhaps adding, different ways that they can help. Another thing that we've done with clients is included different boxes with different dollar amounts. So you're sort of prompting them to say, oh, maybe I want to donate $25 or $50. And you can also tie that directly to, $25 will help feed X number of people, or $50 will help 2 people in this particular program. So tying it to something specific like that is really going to help your donor feel like they're personally connected with that client of yours and helping them in a very direct way. So think about your donation page. Maybe go back and revisit it and figure out, how many clicks does it take to get there? Is it really difficult to use? Is there some way we can make this more visually interesting? And there's lots of things that you can do, and maybe peek around and start looking at other organizations that you like and what they're doing to make their donation pages impactful. So let's move on. This is actually a good transition because I do want to talk about forms and donation pages in a little bit more detail. This is something that there's been a lot of research around, recently, and forms, as you can see from this quote, can be very frustrating. It's the last thing that someone wants to do when they come to a website is fill out a form. So for us as fundraisers and for nonprofits, we want to think about it in terms of how can we connect with that donor in a different way so that the form isn't daunting. It's not something that they just hate filling out, whereas it's something that they can, fill out relatively easily and then move on to get the information that they actually want to receive. So this is from Jen Lesak's website, and she wrote this great blog post, and I encourage you all to look it up afterwards to look at form and form length and how to optimize your forms, especially donation forms on your websites. And I completely recognize that you need things like credit card numbers and all that information, and so take all of this with a little bit of a grain of salt. But in general, the optimal form field number is 4. So as you can see from this infographic, by using only 4 form fields in your form, you're increasing your conversion rate by about 160%. So all that means is people prefer to have shorter forms. They prefer to just have, a little bit of information that they have to plug in. And there's ways to get that additional information moving forward after you have that first few tidbits. So my primary point with all of this is think about getting a little bit of information from the people coming to your website before you delve into, getting their entire life story, because you're going to get more numbers of information, you're going to get more people signing up, and you're going to get more traction to your website by using less form fields than you would if you used 10, 15, however many number that forces people to drop off. The other thing you can think about with forms is there's a few tips on the right-hand side here for how to make the form more attractive, more user-friendly, a little bit less daunting. Using larger text is helpful so that people know exactly what they're filling in. Making the form fields flow in a natural, logical order. So first name, last name, email, there's sort of a natural way that we'd like to fill things out, and you can make your form adapt to that natural progression. And then also just making some of the fields maybe not required might encourage people, to give you their basic information, and then you can follow up and get more information moving forward. Related, typography and fonts. This is something that can be really tricky for nonprofits and for creating communication. So this tip, I'm really, this is more for those organizations who perhaps don't have a style guide. Maybe they don't even have a font that they use consistently. You want to think about kind of creating that brand awareness and that brand identity and consistency across your materials. So I would encourage for those organizations that don't have a style guide for their logo or typography or colors to choose a font that's clear and readable, and kind of make that your default font that you use for all of your materials. And you can create a style for a header, you can create a style for your body text, and kind of choose it so that they go well together and it's consistent and looks clear. And so I just highlighted here, some fonts that might be a good choice. There are definitely fonts out there that are difficult to read, or perhaps don't have that same kind of professional feel that you want to have as an organization. And so I listed those on the right of ones that I don't recommend to use. But definitely think about, Helvetica, Palantino, Garamond. Those are all great, clear, readable fonts that will help resonate with your donors and constituents. Like I mentioned earlier, keeping the same style across your communications is really important. And this is getting a little bit tricky because you have web fonts and you have print fonts. However, you can make them, look similar, or at least look like they match, or, look good together between your digital and your print materials. But certainly keeping, the same body text style throughout your materials is going to be really helpful. Don't try to switch fonts too many times. If you're looking at a direct mail or an email or your website, if you see more than 3 different styles of fonts, you probably need to go back and revisit and figure out, can we reduce this? Can we make this more consistent? And by 3 different styles, I mean either 3 fully different typefaces, or maybe, I'm not meaning different sizes or bold versus regular, but 3 completely different typefaces. I also want to talk a little bit about imagery, and this is something that can be so impactful for you as an organization. So this is an example that I know Derek likes to show as well, so perhaps some of you have seen this before. This is an image of a organization that helps protect seals. And this clearly is a really cute image, and I love showing this because it just makes you feel happy, and you think, oh, what a great organization. They're taking care of all these great seals, and I'd love to support them. So just think about, when you saw this picture, what were you thinking? What did it make you feel? And did it put a smile on your face? And then compare that to this image. And this one, the seals look more distressed. They look, sad. It makes you feel a little bit glum. And my point with this is this might be a more realistic image to what's actually happening with seals. However, in order to resonate with your donors, they really want to see something that's going to make them smile and perhaps is the optimistic view of where you want your organization to be. So I would encourage you, especially for organizations who maybe deal with chronically ill or people in hospital settings or hospice, think about showing, the positive outcome of what your organization is creating. Show the people who have gone through your programs and are now doing better. Show the outcome that you're giving them and helping them as an organization. The other thing you can think about with imagery as you're choosing photos is think about faces. And you will not believe how, how much human connection you can make with an image just by looking at the eyes in particular. So when you're taking photos, try to shy away from those big group shots of people and go up and take a picture of a face of your clients, of your volunteers, of your staff members. Getting that really human connection by capturing a face is going to help you in your communication so much and show exactly what you're doing and exactly who you're helping. And, at times when maybe you're not hosting an event or working directly with clients, you can use things like texture and more abstract photos. You can use different close-ups of objects, and there are still things out there that are interesting to people that you can use for some of your imagery, even if you don't have a lot of clients or a lot of people to take photos of. Similar to the close-ups of the face, think about close-ups of objects too. A lot of your organizations, you have things maybe around your offices, or maybe you're serve the community, and you have different tools or things that could be interesting visually. These are great pieces to sort of supplement some of those photos of people. Maybe you can use them as background images. Think outside the box. And ironically enough, when I say think outside the box, I'm thinking, look for the details, look for these sort of close-ups of objects and things that might grab people's interest as you're putting them in your communications. I also want you to think about using typography, and this will be really helpful, especially for those organizations that don't have the budget to hire a designer or to really focus on creating extremely visual pieces and infographics and that kind of thing. This is a great example of a banner on a website that it's bold, it's a strong message, people know exactly what the organization is doing, and all it is big typography, and that can be very, very powerful. And going back to what I said near the beginning, simplicity is very powerful. And in this case, there's nothing distracting from this banner. It's complete white space, there's no images, and so your entire focus is on that text, which is a really strong message. So think of simplicity as a really powerful tool when you're thinking about communications. I also encourage you, you can repurpose old material, like infographics that you might have or statistics, but you can also repurpose material that's already created online. And when you're looking for materials, you of course want to ask permission that you can use an infographic offline that may be related to your organization. But it's certainly a useful thing and will help you. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. There's a lot of great content, infographics, visuals out there that you can use that are already relevant to your organizations and what you're doing. So think about contacting someone and saying, hey, could I use that infographic? It was really cool. I'd love to use that in some of my materials. This is a great resource. So again, for those organizations who are doing more design in-house, this is thenounproject.com, and it's basically a database of different icons that you could use in some of your visual material. We use this internally a lot. It's a great resource. Many of the icons are, around $1.99 to purchase. There's many of them that are free, that are public domain, but it's a good place to start and sort of get, some ideas on how you could maybe use an icon next to each of your programs, or use icons to highlight the different types of clients you're serving. There's a lot of different options for how to use these to sort of leverage your visual appeal. So that's all I had for today. I did want to give you all an opportunity to ask questions. So I would be happy to hear any of your questions from different organizations. Feel free to jump in. Actually, I see a couple of questions that came in while I was speaking, and I'd love to answer some of these. Cindy mentioned that I mentioned buying lists, and does this really work? I'll fully disclose with you that we don't do a lot of that with our clients, and so it's definitely something that we're testing right now. I will say, it's not right for all organizations, but for the particular one that I mentioned earlier, it turned out really well, and they were able to raise quite a bit that way. So it's something that we kind of figure out and strategize with each client of what's going to be the best fit for them and what's the best return for that organization. Generally, the list buying is going to work better if your organization has more of a, I guess I would say like a global appeal, or, kind of crosses all different demographics in appealing to audiences. And then I also got a question from Lori about sending you the presentation. Yes, I will be uploading this to Achieve Access, both a recording and the presentation itself, and you are more than welcome to use that as inspiration moving forward. Oh, I got a long question. Hang on one sec while I read this. This is a good question. So Jessica is asking, she says, I'm new to this, but for nonprofit marketing, I've been hearing more about ugly designs, reds, yellows, underlined, bold, being more effective than sleek or authentic and emotional photos, being the best way to connect with donors. And she says she's hearing the opposite from me. So Jessica, the first thing I would say to your question is, it's so dependent on the organization, and every organization is going to find that certain messaging and design and approach is best for them. And really, when you're working with whatever designer, either in-house or outside, that's something that you want to discover with them. What's going to work best for my organization? What have you seen work in the past for my type of organization? What's going to be the most effective for my donors and my demographic of people that I communicate with? So it's sort of a difficult question to answer. But I would say in general, no matter what type of design you're doing, whether it be that sort of ugly design you're talking about or the really sleek minimalist design, you definitely want to be sure that you're still being clear with your messaging. So regardless of the colors or the typography or imagery that you're using, be sure that donors know exactly what you do, exactly who you are, and exactly who you're helping. And I think that's more important than the style that revolves around that. Text donations. So Cindy's asking about how text donations work. I don't know if any of you listen to like This American Life. They're sort of a famous NPR program. They do a lot of text donating. And the way it works is you have to get in contact with the text provider and have a relationship with them. But basically how it works is the consumer can pick up their phone, text, $10 to whatever given number that organization provided to them. And then that $10 is added directly to their phone bill. So it's a way to make it incredibly easy and almost a one-step process for a consumer to donate directly to an organization without having to fill out a lot of information. So it's really easy for the consumer, but it takes a little bit more work on the nonprofit side to organize all of that. And then Lauren is asking here, are there any other websites that I would recommend to get free stock photos? I'm glad you asked that, Lauren. I can't think off the top of my head any that are completely free, but there are definitely affordable images out there and high quality images that probably fit in your kind of budget. One website that I like to use is veer.com, which is V as in Victor, EER.com. And especially if you're purchasing images for digital use, you can kind of purchase the smaller sized images and you can get as low as $5 for those. So it's really, it's a small investment, and I think it's going to be worth your time to have, great textures and colors, and photos that are in focus obviously is really important. So getting photos from that site, or sometimes I'll use iStock Photo, occasionally Big Stock Photo. You just want to be careful because some of those different stock photo sites will charge you differently depending on the use of the photo. So veer.com is one where it's pretty simple and their licensing is pretty simple to figure out, which is why I prefer them. Hopefully that answers your question. Thank you very much to everybody. I'll stick around for just a couple more minutes, and if anyone else has any additional questions, I'd be happy to talk to you. Otherwise, feel free to email me. I love, hearing what different organizations are doing. If you want a second opinion on a design or need some help with whatever it might be, getting resources, stock photo sites, whatever it might be, feel free to shoot me an email. I'd be happy to chat with you. All right. It looks like we covered all of the questions. So again, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure speaking with you guys, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday afternoon.